Okay, so what on earth could a famously confusing play about two guys waiting by a tree have to do with an ancient Indian epic about a warrior having a crisis on a battlefield? I mean, on the surface, absolutely nothing, right? But stick with me, because the connection between them, it might just change the way you think about purpose, action, and what it really means to wait. Let's get into it.
Nothing to be done from Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. It's not just a line of dialogue, it's the whole vibe of the play. It's that feeling of complete and utter helplessness, you know? Like you're stuck in a loop and there's just no way out.
For decades, people have been scratching their heads over this play. Seriously, it's just two characters, Vladimir and Estragon, killing time with these bizarre circular conversations, all while they wait for some guy named Godot, who, spoiler alert, never shows up. It is literally the ultimate play about doing nothing.
But here's a thought. What if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if we could see this masterpiece of absurdism through a completely different lens, an ancient one, from the Bhagavad Gita? Because when we do that, the play stops being about a meaningless universe and starts being about something way more personal and way more urgent.
Okay, to really see this connection, first we have to get a handle on the crisis at the heart of each story. And yeah, they take place in worlds that seem like their universes apart, but the parallels are, well, they're pretty mind-blowing. So on one side, you've got Vladimir and Estragon. Their crisis is this passive, endless wait for someone, anyone, to come and save them. And on the other side, you have Arjuna from the Gita. He's a legendary warrior, but his crisis is an active paralysis. He's frozen solid by doubt right before the biggest battle of his life. See? Two totally different setups, but they end up in the exact same spot, stuck. For Vladimir and Estragon, this crisis is just a constant, slow burn. They're completely adrift. They question everything, why they're here, what they remember, who they even are. And they fill that terrifying silence with chatter that just goes in circles. It's their entire state of being, a cycle of waiting that never, ever ends. Now, let's swap that lonely road for a massive battlefield in ancient India. Because right here, a totally different kind of crisis is about to kick off one of the most profound philosophical chats in human history.
Arjuna is supposed to be the hero of this story. He's meant to lead the charge. But when he looks out across the field and sees his own family, his cousins, his old teachers, all lined up against him, he just breaks. The text literally says his bow just slips out of his hands. He's hit with this thing called vishada, this deep, soul-crushing despair that makes him question everything. His duty, his life, all of it.
And this is where things get really interesting. This is where their paths just completely split. Both stories start with total paralysis, but for Arjuna, that crisis becomes a trigger. It forces this deep conversation with his guide, Krishna, that actually leads him to enlightenment. And for Vladimir and Estragon, their crisis just repeats. The conversation goes nowhere. The cycle just keeps on spinning. So why the totally different outcomes? Well, it all comes down to a fundamental clash in philosophy between these two works. It all centers on one big question. What's the role of action in a world that feels completely out of your control? The Gita's answer to this kind of despair is built around this amazing idea, nishkama karma. Now, it's often translated as detached action, but it's so much smarter than that. Krishna doesn't tell Arjuna to stop caring. He says, do the thing that is your duty, but, and this is the whole game, let go of your attachment to the results of that action. The problem isn't doing the work, it's being obsessed with the prize at the end.
And boom, there it is, the absolute core of the contrast. The Gita's whole deal is about taking action, doing what's right, what's necessary, without being shackled to one specific outcome. And Vladimir and Estragon, they are the living, breathing embodiment of the exact opposite. Their entire existence is hung up on one single result, Godot showing up. Their paralysis isn't some random cosmic joke, it's a direct result of that attachment.
This even changes how they experience time itself. In the Gita, time is cyclical, yeah? But it's like a spiral staircase. Every loop is a chance to climb higher, to grow, to get free. In Godot, time is a flat circle. It's a prison. Act 2 is just a weird, distorted repeat of Act 1. Tomorrow isn't a new day, it's just today's waiting, all over again. Time doesn't heal, it just makes the trap smaller.
So, if we're going to take this Gita-inspired lens seriously, it forces us to rethink the biggest character in the play. You know, the one who never even shows up. The play is famous for never telling us who Godot is. But you know what? Maybe that's the whole point. Maybe the question isn't who is Godot, but what is Godot? Let's stop thinking of Godot as some guy and start thinking of him as an idea.
When you see it that way, Godot isn't a person at all. He becomes a symbol for some of the biggest ideas in the Gita. He is Asha, the kind of hope that, ironically, becomes a cage. He's Maya, the grand illusion that keeps them convinced their waiting actually means something. And most importantly, he is Phala, the fruit of the action, that one single result they're so obsessed with, they can't do anything else.
So here's the bottom line. Godot is the name we give to whatever outside thing we're waiting for to finally make our lives matter. You know, it's that promotion, that perfect relationship, that one magic bullet we think is going to fix everything. And all that waiting, it stops us from actually doing anything right here, right now.
And that brings us to the final huge takeaway here. When you put these two masterpieces next to each other, they basically present us with a fundamental choice. Is meaning something we just sit around and wait for, or is it something we get up and create? All of a sudden, waiting for Godot becomes this powerful cautionary tale. It gives us the 3-step recipe for getting stuck. Step 1, hand over all responsibility for your own happiness to some outside source, your Godot. Step 2, let waiting become your main form of action. And the result? You're trapped in a loop, living the same day over and over and over again. And that's the big aha moment, isn't it? When you look at it through the Gita, the play is no longer this bleak, depressing statement about a cold, empty universe. It becomes a profound story about human choice. The real tragedy isn't that Godot never arrives. The real tragedy is that Vladimir and Estragon never leave.
So in the end, we're left with two really powerful ways to deal with life's big, scary unknowns. Absurdism, like we see in Godot, does an amazing job of showing us the silence, forcing us to stare into the void. The philosophy of the Gita looks at that same void and responds not with waiting, but with disciplined participation, a call to get in the game, to act, even when you have no idea how it's going to turn out.
And that leaves us with one last, kind of uncomfortable thought. Because Beckett's play isn't really about two tramps on a stage. It's a mirror. It's a mirror held right up to us. And it forces us to ask ourselves, what external fix am I counting on? What hope is actually keeping me stuck? What Godot am I waiting for?